Okay, this is my semester 1 presentation about General George B. McClellan. Alright, Mr. McClellan was born in Philadelphia, December 3rd, 1823, to parents George and Elizabeth. He went to school at the University of Pennsylvania for law. Later in his life, around the age of 15, he changed his mind and wanted to join the U.S. Military Academy. His father sent a letter to President Tyler, and McClellan was able to join a year early. After he graduated, he was deployed into the Mexican-American War as an engineer. He was stricken with dysentery and malaria. He was hospitalized for weeks and weeks. Later in the war, he observed tactics and strategy that other generals used during the war, which would later help him in the Civil War when he became a general himself. During peacetime, he served as a surveyor for the railroads. He was later fired as that job because apparently he was a bad surveyor. He was looking for a good valley to cross through the Rocky Mountains, and he had a disagreement with his employers, and they found a much better pass, which he was then fired. Alright, Civil War time. He rapidly moved through the ranks to the second most powerful position, helped by his friend Salmon P. Chase, which was the Treasurer Secretary. After the defeat at Bull Run, McClellan was called upon by President Lincoln. He became in charge of the Potomac Army. He was in charge of raising an army of the Potomac and eventually using it in battle. And he was very, very good at raising an army, but as it turned out, was not very good at fighting. He had problems with war strategy. A lot of his problems was he overestimated enemy strength. He would about 2 to 3 times the enemy strength he would tell his superiors to make it possible to get more men or supplies to better his army personally. Politically, as a general, he was for slavery, which, as a northern general, angered a lot of radicals. And he constantly feuded with the number one in the army position, Mr. Scott, and they disagreed about just about everything, including strategy. For a very short time, he became the general-in-chief of the army from the fall of 1861 to the spring of 1862. He proposed multiple strategies, which included amphibious assaults and driving a very large force straight to the heart of the Confederate capital to bring them down. He didn't last very long in the position because he was very, very secretive in his strategy. He only divulged what he wanted to say unless he was forced to, and he wasn't very well trusted, mostly because he was very secretive. He didn't trust anyone in the northern government, or didn't really trust anyone ever, so that reciprocated to him himself. Okay, battles. There was really 2 major battles, or 1 major battle, you could say. They were kind of combined. The major battle that everyone knows and what he is famous for is the Battle of Antietam. But leading up to that, there's a Battle of South Mountain. It was against General Stonewall Jackson, and it was most battles that he participated in. It was usually a standoff when it comes to number of casualties or military position. The only reason he was called successful in some of his military campaigns is because he outnumbered the Confederate troops in such numbers that his casualties did not matter as much as the Confederates. So anyways, at the Battle of South Mountain, Mr. Jackson pulled his troops to not further any more casualties, and McClellan failed to pursue him, and he was going to set up an attack a few days from then, or the next day, which would be known as the Battle of Antium, which would be the picture you see right here, one of the pictures of Antium. The Battle of Antium actually took place a few days after McClellan's schedule due to weather, like fog. It was the bloodiest battle in the Civil War by far, and one of the bloodiest battles in history. I mean, man after man died. It was very it was a very big fault of McClellan's, the way this war turned out. Not this war, this battle. Jackson once again removed his troops because he didn't have the same numbers and resources that McClellan had. So at that point, McClellan, instead of aggressively following Jackson, destroying his troops, and possibly taking the capital close by, he decided to wait and recover himself, which also let Jackson recover himself as well. This is what would lead to the end of his military career. This is a picture of General McClellan and Abraham Lincoln talking after the Battle of Antietam. Lincoln and his followers, or other political leaders, were very unhappy with McClellan, the way he was using the Army of the Potomac, and definitely of the outcome of the battle. They thought he could have acted more aggressively, and with the actions that he permitted then, Abraham Lincoln thought it would be the right decision to technically fire him from his position. He was removed as commander of the Potomac Army. He was sent home and told to receive further orders when instructed, but those orders never came from the military. That was the end of McClellan's military career. Alright, so next is after the war. After the war, McClellan proudly called himself a Democrat, and he was convinced or decided he wanted to run for the presidential candidate. This is a picture of him and his vice president, George A. Pendleton. He wasn't very successful for two reasons. One, because Abraham Lincoln was so popular, and he couldn't. He was very split because his party had one set of ideas and McClellan had another, along with his vice president. So his running, he couldn't run very well. He couldn't run very truthfully, and he lost to Abraham Lincoln by a very wide margin. 70% of his own army, the Potomac Army, did not vote for him. He voted for Abraham Lincoln. So after that, in 1878, he became the governor of New Jersey until 1881. He served one term. After that, he settled down. He began writing and traveling. He had 2 kids with his wife. Their names were Max and Mary. General McClellan died October 29th, 1885. Alright, in conclusion, upon reading about McClellan, I discovered there is many different opinions about him. The most, not promising, but the most apparent one is that McClellan was not a very well general. He had all the skills and tools, but he was just far too timid to be a very strong, independent general that could make powerful decisions that ended wars. There is a small portion of opinion that thinks McClellan was an incredible general in that he was just removed from his position as a political stunt to make the radicals in the North happy. When Ulysses S. Grant was questioned about McClellan, which is my quote here, he states, "McClellan is to me one of the great mysteries of the war." And that looks like it for my presentation, so hope everything went well. Thanks.